Welcome back to your computer science course, Exploring Data Quantity and Conclusion Accuracy. Let's take a look at your vocabulary. Data quantity, the amount of information collected. Reliability, how trustworthy or accurate something is. Conclusions, statements or opinions reached after considering information. In this lesson, you'll learn about how the amount of data we collect can affect the accuracy of our conclusions. By the end of the lesson, you will be able to explain how changing the size of your data sample can influence the reliability of your conclusions. What do you think would happen if you only collected a small amount of data to draw a conclusion? How about if you collected a large amount of data? Our mission for today is to understand how the size of our data sample can impact the reliability of our conclusions. Are you ready for the challenge? First up, we're going to collect different amounts of data and observe how the varying quantities can lead to different conclusions. Remember, the more data you have, the clearer the picture becomes. Let's kick off our data adventure with a fun experiment. Coin flip. Pause the video and grab a coin to join along. Alright, first we're going to flip our coin 10 times and record our data. I have a virtual coin I'm going to flip. Okay, here's my online virtual coin flipper. I can flip one coin at a time or as many coins at a time as I want. Let's see how it works. Okay, we have our flip number 1 and it landed on heads. Tails, heads, tails, heads, flip, number 6, tails, heads, and we have heads again, and now number 9 is tails, and now we've got 10 coin flips. When I scroll down to the bottom, I've got my data. I've got my coin flipping results. I've flipped it 10 times. We've got 50% heads and 50% tails. Now let's look at that data in a table form. So we took our results from our coin flipping, and it looks like we have 5 heads and 5 tails. So 50-50 when we flipped it 10 times. Now, let's flip our coin 100 times and record how many times it landed on heads or tails. Okay, rather than flipping it 100 times one by one, I'm going to type in 100 so we can see we're going to flip it 100 times. Okay, it's very quickly generated a result of us flipping the coin 100 times. As you can see here, it's given us 100 times of flipping the coin. That saved us some time doing that. Okay, so what do we come up with? 43% heads and 57% tails. Let's put that in a chart form. All right, so let's look at this in a pie chart form. So we flipped the coin 100 times. 57 of those times landed on tails, and 43 times it landed on heads. So we have 43% and 57% out of 100 tries. Now let's flip our coin 1,000 times and record how many times it landed on heads or tails. Alright, now we're back to our online coin flipper, and we're going to type in 1,000. Let's flip this coin 1,000 times. Okay, it saved us a lot of work. I could scroll through this for days and show you that it flipped it 1,000 times here, right? Okay, let's go back up to the top here. Alright, let's transfer our data over into a visual. Okay, so after we flipped the coin 1,000 times, it landed on heads 512 times and on tails 488 times. So we've got 48.8% tails and 51.2% heads. Now here's a big challenge. Let's flip our coin 100,000 times and record how many times it landed on heads or tails. Let's go. Okay, now let's set it to 100,000. Thank goodness I have this online coin flipper so I don't have to do this on my own. That'd take forever. Okay, let's flip it. Now it's going to flip it 100,000 times, and we've got our data. Let's take it over and put it into a chart. All right, let's look at our data in a pie chart. So we flipped the coin 100,000 times, 50,005 times it landed on heads, 49,995 times it landed on tails. So we have 50% tails and 50% heads. Now let's combine all of our data and draw conclusions. Okay, let's review our data. So at the top of our table, we have the number of flips, whether it landed on heads or tails, and then the percentage. So when we flipped it 10 times, it landed 5 times on heads, 5 times on tails, and we got a 50-50 chance, 50-50 percentage. So we wanted to get better data, so we flipped it 100 times. It landed 43 times on heads, 57 times on tails, so we came out with a 43% heads and a 57% tails. Collecting even more data, we flipped it 1,000 times. It landed on heads 512 times, tails 488 times, and the percentage was 51.2% heads, 48% tails. And then we collected a ton of data by flipping it 100,000 times. 50,005 times it landed on heads, 49,995 times it landed on tails. So we have a final result of 50% heads and 50% tails. And since we collected so much data, 100,000 times is pretty good, we can trust in our conclusion of 50-50. Now let's look at some tips that you can use when you're gathering your own data. Number 1, organize your data. Use a notebook or a digital spreadsheet to record your observations and data systematically. Create columns for different variables like coin flips, plant growth measurement, or survey responses to keep track of the data collected. Visual representations. Create graphs and charts to visually represent your data. For example, use bar graphs for survey results or line graphs for plant growth measurements. Visual representations can help you spot patterns and trends in the data more easily. Calculate averages and trends. Calculate averages or percentages based on your data to identify overall trends. Look for any patterns or changes in the data as you increase the sample size. Compare different data samples. Compare the conclusions drawn from smaller data samples to those from larger data samples. Analyze how the reliability and accuracy of the conclusions change with the amount of data collected. Compare different data samples. You can compare the conclusions drawn from smaller data samples to those from larger data samples. Analyze how the reliability and accuracy of your conclusions change with the amount of data collected. Seek patterns and anomalies. Look for patterns or outliers in the data that may influence your conclusion. Consider why certain data points stand out and how they impact the overall analysis. Questions. Challenge yourself by asking questions about the data and conclusions drawn. Consider if additional data points would strengthen your conclusions or if certain data points would raise doubts. And share your findings. You can discuss your findings with a family member or write a summary of your analysis. You can explain how the amount of data collected impacts the accuracy of your conclusions in a clear and concise manner. Great job, Epic Comet. You're ready to move on to the next activity.